Hello, beautiful homemakers. We are continuing Chapter 1 of the original Fascinating Womanhood pamphlets. We are in Pamphlet 1, Chapter 1. This section is called How the Fascinating Girl Applies the Principles. The Story of Johnny and Miss Innocent. Every man under the hypnotic spell of an attractive girl goes through the same stages. Let us now observe these principles put in practice by little Miss Innocent, a neighbor of yours, whose alarming fascination for men has always seemed a miracle to you. Watch her. Getting attention. Innocent never stays home longer than absolutely necessary. She is always gadding about where she can be seen and noticed. Wherever a group of men can be found and the presence of girls can in any way be sanctioned, there you will find her innocence in all her glory. Not only does she advertise herself by appearing everywhere, but she also takes pains to appear at her best. Her hair is always arranged in just the fashion most becoming to her. Her complexion has just the right touch of cosmetics, and her attire, even if she has to be her own dressmaker, is always the most girlish and the most cuddlesome to be found. Her shoes and ankles are neat and trim as can be, and her skirt is of just the length affected by the most attractive women she knows. She sees to it, whether consciously or unconsciously, that in any crowd of girls she stands out as one of the most feminine. While other girls are discussing sport or personalities, she is thinking of her appearance, fixing a stray hair, eyeing herself in the glass, or sizing up the men. She is never unconscious that she is a woman and that men are around who might notice her. She is ever on the alert for their appreciative glances. A man might gaze a minute or two at another girl, deliberately weigh her charms, and decide whether or not he is interested, all without detection. But he cannot thus calmly decide matters for himself with Miss Innocent. Let him but steal a glance in her direction, and he is immediately detected. She lets him catch her startled eye, drops her lashes in pretty confusion, and if possible, even engineers a blush. Can anything be better calculated to attract man's attention? There you have the first stage. Now I know that this sounds really over the top, but they are speaking to women who have no clue how to flirt, and so they're exaggerating it. Arousing interest. Now let's spy upon her methods with Johnny Hopeful, who has just succeeded in being introduced to her innocence. Does she talk about herself? Not she. That's no way to arouse Johnny's interest. She talks about Johnny, or rather, she gently leads Johnny to talking about himself. After a few searching but seemingly artless questions, she quickly discovers that Johnny considers himself a fairly expert swimmer. Upon this, her eyes and her attitude show every indication of amazement. How can he keep from sinking? Plainly, a man who can swim is to her an extraordinary being. This was 100 years ago when a lot of people, they could not swim. As Johnny undertakes to explain how easy swimming is when you know how, he begins to think that maybe there is something worthy of admiration about his mastery of this accomplishment. And when Innocent refuses to believe that swimming is easy, and insists that she herself could never stay above water, the feeling dawns upon him that if he were not a man, and a real man at that, he might have found swimming more difficult. Now, as Johnny isn't very often made to feel that he is exceptionally manly, He finds the sensation rather pleasant. And while today we couldn't do that about swimming, there are other things you could do to make him feel more manly. Desirous of basking a little longer in the sunshine of those awe-struck, hero-worshipping eyes, he launches into a long technical discussion of the different strokes professedly to show how simple they are, but really to show how simple they are for a masterful man like Johnny. Men that really know cars, this is their way of showing mastery to you, the woman who doesn't know a thing about cars. Although Innocent doesn't understand a word of his technicalities, Johnny doesn't care. Not while those eyes persist in regarding him as an extraordinary man among men. And when you're dating, you think that about the man you're with. And yet, after you've been married a while, you're like, I don't want to hear another word about cars, or whatever his field of mastery is, because you've heard it all before. But he needs to be built up. And in later books, pamphlets, they will discuss that. And let me repeat. Although Innocent doesn't understand a word of his technicalities, Johnny doesn't care. Not while those eyes persist in regarding him as an extraordinary man among men. And when we stop seeing our man as extraordinary when we're married, and we start chastising our husbands, that is when we start losing the interest of our man. Before the evening is over, Johnny has engaged to take her to the natatorium and give her innocence a first lesson. Anticipating the pleasure of showing off his swan dive, his side stroke, and his crawl before the appreciative eyes of Innocent, Johnny can hardly wait for the day to arrive. Is Johnny interested? Foolish question. The second stage is so far completed that the third is well begun. Creating desire. When Johnny gets home, those eyes, to his amazement, monopolize his thoughts and haunt his dreams. I've known prettier girls, he tells himself over and over again, but none of them has eyes like hers. Anyone else could see, of course, that the only unusual thing about them is the unalloyed respect, approval, and appreciation with which they regarded Johnny. The most beautiful eyes in the loveliest face of the most charming woman that ever lived would not fascinate Johnny thus if there was in them the slightest shadow, so far as Johnny is concerned, of criticism, suspicion, or disrespect. So long as the eyes of her innocence continue this flattering behavior, just so long will Innocent herself be to him an irresistible and inescapable magnet, unless other eyes should come along which behave even more flatteringly. Ever so often, he discovers, his self-esteem must be bolstered by her reiterated appreciation. When he feels, as he often does, that others do not value him according to his deserts, his only relief from despondence is to be found in the comforting and uplifting companionship of Miss Innocent. Sympathetic understanding, the magic force in creating desire. As time progresses, he gradually unfolds his hopes, plans, ideals, and ambitions, all the cherished fancies which, in fear of ridicule, have hitherto been screened from all but himself. And perhaps you think he doesn't relish the approval which each additional revelation seems to meet. So great is his enjoyment that when he has finally told everything admirable there is to tell about himself, he will draw upon his imagination for revelations equally admirable but not equally true. Deserved or undeserved, her appreciation is too rare and grateful a thing for him to scruple at a little exaggeration. Indeed, he becomes so intoxicated with this unprecedented sympathy that he cannot distinguish very well between the deserved and the undeserved. He believes himself a better man than he ever before thought himself. He looks upon his past performances as unworthy of his true character, and he confidently expects his future life to justify her exalted conception of him. In view of these honorable aspirations, who can say that the esteem of innocent is wholly unjustified? Certainly not Johnny, who finds this appreciation indispensable to his peace of mind, and who has absolute faith in his future, if not in his present, worthiness. Finding himself at first unable to live without her appreciation, he soon finds himself equally unable to live without the girl herself. The desire is created. Will her innocence nurse it into action? And here's the thing that single women don't seem to understand about single men. They don't have these desires of taking care of a family awakened until they actually have a family. You are the first step in awakening those desires. So women are always saying, oh, we want a successful man. Well, he becomes successful when he has the desire to begin working for you, supporting you and the babies. That's what fuels his desire to provide. That when you show him that he is worthy in your eyes, he begins to live up to your viewpoint of him. You are the one that's supposed to be there to bolster his ego, to help him make big decisions about how to bring in an income and anything else that he needs to accomplish. You're supposed to back him up. You are the one that's supposed to help him get dressed and out the door in the mornings. Because the most successful men, they all have their wives helping them behind the scenes. This is an unpopular opinion, but the truth is that the more a wife becomes dependent upon her husband financially, the more he begins to excel at work. If she is doing her job of lifting him up instead of dragging him down, if she is pleasant to come home to, if she's not a nag, if she's not complaining about what she's doing in her life, if she is doing her part at home and not expecting him to come home to a second job, if the house is a second job for you, you're not going to want to come home either. That's why it works so much better when the wife is at home. And if she is spending the family's money wisely. But unfortunately, too many men never reach their potential because they don't have the help that a high caliber wife is supposed to give. Many times today, you hear women thinking that it's all about them and that the husband is to do all the giving. I constantly hear women ask their boyfriends or husband to help them accomplish all the things that they want to do. Yet I never hear them ask, what can I do to help my boyfriend or husband succeed? What would make him happy? And yet Genesis 2:18 tells us that God has a different plan for women. Today, women are constantly complaining that they're overwhelmed and unsatisfied. Why do you think this is? In the next video, we'll learn if Miss Innocent is able to satisfy Johnny's judgment and if she can bring him to action. Bye.